The 3 a.m. call shattered the quiet, but it was the silent message waiting in my rearview mirror that proved I hadn't escaped a cursed house. I'd just become the delivery man. The call came at 3 a.m., slicing through the quiet hum of my apartment like a shard of glass. It was Sarah, my older sister, and even before I answered, I could feel the frantic energy radiating through the phone line. "Leo, are you awake?" Her voice was a tight, breathless wire. "Barely," I mumbled, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. The digital clock glowed 3:07 a.m. "What's wrong? Is it Mom?" No, Mom's fine. It's about the house, the one upstate. Did you tell anyone you were going?" I sat up, suddenly wide awake. The air in the room felt suddenly cold. "Going where, Sarah? I haven't planned any trips." There was a pause on her end, thick with unspoken dread. "Don't play dumb with me, Leo. The old Miller place, the one Dad left to both of us. You booked the rental van yesterday, didn't you? I saw the confirmation email pop up on the shared cloud drive." My stomach dropped. I had booked it. A hulking, windowless panel van, paid for in cash, scheduled for pickup at dawn. I hadn't told Sarah because I knew exactly how she would react. Sarah was the practical one, the one who still called the place creepy even after Dad died 5 years ago. I, apparently, was the sentimental idiot. "I was just going to look at it, Sarah. Clean up some of the junk before we list it properly." "No, Leo, you weren't. You were going to stay." Her voice cracked. "The paperwork on the safe deposit box, the note you left on the fridge, you're going back to Blackwood Creek, aren't you?" I looked out my bedroom window at the indifferent sprawl of the city skyline. Blackwood Creek. The name itself tasted like wet earth and stagnant water. It was where we spent every summer as kids, before Dad bought the place from the Miller family, a property shrouded in local lore about vanishing hunters and shadows in the woods. "I need to settle things, Sarah," I admitted, the words tasting dry in my mouth. "It's been too long. I need to see it one last time. Really see it." "Leo, listen to me. Listen very carefully." Sarah's tone shifted from panicked sister to something commanding, something almost desperate. "You'll die there. Don't go." The sheer force of her warning stopped the breath in my chest. It wasn't the usual, "don't go," it's run-down caution. This was primal fear. "Why are you saying that?" I whispered, gripping the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Because I know what you're going for, Leo, and I know who else is waiting for you there." My mind raced back through the years, dredging up the murky details of our final summer at the creek. The whispers in the attic, the scratches on the back door that Dad always dismissed as raccoons. And then, the reason we hadn't been back since Dad died, the accident involving my cousin Thomas. Thomas, who had gone out exploring near the old quarry behind the Miller property and never returned. They never found a body, just his discarded compass near the edge. "It's just Thomas's memory," I argued weakly. "It's closure. No, Leo, it's not Thomas you're worried about finding, is it? It's him." My blood ran cold. Him. The entity Dad used to barricade himself away from. The one he wrote about in those cryptic, crumbling journals locked in the study. The one that, according to local legend, guarded the boundaries of the Blackwood land. "You've been reading Dad's old notebooks again, haven't you?" I accused, though I knew the answer. Sarah had always been fascinated by the occult side of our family history, the stories Dad had tried so hard to keep locked away. "I've been trying to understand why he never let us set foot in the cellar," she shot back. "Leo, the rental van pickup is at 6 a.m. If you leave, you're going straight into whatever is waiting for you. Please, just burn the keys to that van and stay here." I looked down at the hiking boots I'd already placed by the door, ready for the long drive north. The thought of staying, of letting the mystery of Blackwood Creek fester, was unbearable. I needed the answers that only that forgotten house held. I can't, Sarah. I need to know what Dad was running from. I need to know if what he wrote is real. It is real, Leo, and it knows you're coming back. It's been waiting for the last heir to step onto that soil, she pleaded. Whatever you do, don't go into the boathouse. Promise me you won't go near the water. I paused, my heart hammering against my ribs. The boathouse? Dad had always kept it padlocked, claiming the structural integrity was shot. Fine, I lied easily. I promise. No boathouse. I hung up the phone before she could press further, the lie already a heavy weight on my tongue. The sun hadn't even begun to touch the horizon, but I was already running on fumes fueled by desperation and morbid curiosity. I grabbed the keys to the van, the old sputtering Ford Econoline I'd secured for the trip, and slipped out of the apartment building. The cold morning air hit me, sharp and invigorating. The drive was 12 hours of highway hypnosis, punctuated only by gas station coffee and the growing certainty that I was driving straight into a trap. As I crossed the county line into the deep woods surrounding Blackwood Creek, the cell service died completely. The gravel road leading up to the Miller property was overgrown, just as I remembered. The towering pines leaning in so closely, they created a perpetual twilight. The house itself materialized through the mist, a dark, skeletal silhouette against the bruised morning sky. It looked worse than I remembered. The porch sagged, the paint was peeling like diseased skin, and one of the upstairs windows was completely boarded over with newer, starkly white plywood. I parked the van and cut the engine. Silence descended, heavy and absolute. It wasn't the silence of nature. It was the silence of a place holding its breath. I pulled the heavy flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out into the cold. The air smelled intensely of pine needles and something metallic, like old pennies left out in the rain. I walked around to the back of the van and opened the loading door, retrieving the only tools I'd brought: a heavy-duty crowbar and Dad's antique leather-bound hunting rifle case, which I knew contained the disassembled weapon he insisted on keeping near. As I hefted the rifle case onto my shoulder, something shifted in the peripheral shadows of the woods near the tree line. It was too large to be a deer, too slow to be a coyote. It moved with a distinct heavy dragging sound. I froze, aiming the beam of my flashlight into the darkness. Nothing. "Just the wind, Leo," I muttered, trying to convince myself. I turned toward the front porch. The front door was locked, predictably. I didn't bother with the key Dad had left hidden under the fake rock. I jammed the crowbar into the gap between the frame and the door and yanked hard. The wood groaned in protest, then splintered inward with a satisfying, jarring crack. The house swallowed the sound. I stepped over the threshold. Dust motes danced in the thin shafts of light, piercing the grimy windows. The familiar scent of decay and disuse hit me immediately. I moved into the main living area. The furniture was still draped in white sheets, resembling slumped, waiting ghosts. I bypassed the kitchen and headed straight for the only place I truly needed to go first: Dad's study, tucked away at the back of the house. The door was solid oak, bolted from the inside. This was the real test. If Dad had barricaded it before he died, it meant he hadn't left any secrets accessible from the outside. I inserted the tip of the crowbar near the hinges and pushed, but the wood wouldn't yield. I repositioned, aiming for the lock mechanism itself, bracing my foot against the wall. With a final, furious heave, the lock mechanism shattered. The door burst open, not inward but outward, hitting the adjacent wall with a dull thud. The room inside was utterly black, save for a single pale shape illuminated in the center of the otherwise empty floorboards. It was a stack of notebooks, bound in faded black leather, positioned precisely in the middle of the room, as if waiting for me. I took a step into the study, the rifle case swinging heavily. My heart leaped as my beam caught something else tucked beside the stack of books. It wasn't a journal. It was a small wooden music box, one Sarah and I hadn't seen since we were children. Dad had always kept it locked away. Reaching down, I carefully picked up the music box. It was cold. I turned the tiny silver key on the side. It clicked once, then began to play a slow, distorted melody, a tune I vaguely recognized from childhood nightmares. As the eerie, wobbling notes filled the air, I felt the floorboards beneath my feet vibrate. It wasn't the house settling, it was a slow, rhythmic pounding coming from directly below me. The music box tune ended abruptly with a sharp, metallic snap, and the thudding from beneath the study floor stopped, replaced by a sound that made the hair stand up on my neck. The distinct, slow scraping of wood being dragged across stone, coming from the dark opening of the cellar door, which I hadn't even noticed was there until that very moment, located just behind where the door had slammed open. The silence that followed the music box snapping shut was heavier, more menacing than the noise had been. The scraping sound had ceased, but the space where it originated, the hidden cellar entrance, felt suddenly charged, expectant. I dropped the music box. It clattered onto the dusty floor, its delicate tune permanently silenced. My breath hitched as I realized the implications. Dad hadn't just locked the study door, he had barricaded the only entrance to the cellar from the outside, and now, by breaking the door down, I had essentially invited whatever was down there to come up. My hand instinctively went to the rifle case, fumbling with the brass latches. My training, years spent serving overseas, kicked in, overriding the paralyzing dread. Assess, secure, engage. I flipped the latches. The rifle components, the stock, the barrel, the bolt, were cold beneath my fingers. Assembly would take precious seconds I might not have. I scooped up the stack of leather-bound notebooks. They felt heavy, weighted with secrets. I retreated backward slowly, keeping my flashlight beam trained on the gaping black maw of the cellar entrance. I had to get out of the study, get back to the relative safety of the main room, and assemble the weapon. As I backed toward the doorway, my foot nudged something metallic. I glanced down. It was the deadbolt mechanism from the study door ripped clean out of the frame, and smeared across the exposed wood beneath where the bolt used to sit, something dark and glistening caught the light. Not paint, not rust. It was thick, almost tar-like, but it shimmered with a disturbing, almost oily sheen. I brought the flashlight closer, my stomach revolting. It was blood. Old, dried, but undeniably blood. And it wasn't just smeared. It looked like something had been clawing at the inside of the door, trying desperately to hold it shut, leaving trails of ruptured tissue as it fought the wood. He was trying to keep something in, I breathed, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. Sarah's frantic warnings echoed. He never let us set foot in the cellar. I backed out of the study, pivoting quickly toward the hallway. That was when I heard the sound again, not scraping this time. It was a wet, heavy thump, as if a sack of concrete had been dropped onto the floor directly beneath me in the cellar. I didn't wait. I bolted into the main living room, dropping the rifle case onto the dusty rug. I tore into the components, my fingers flying as I assembled the old hunting rifle, a .30-06, reliable and powerful. The rhythmic thumping from below intensified. Thump, thump, thump. It was deliberate, measuring. I slid the assembled, fully loaded rifle up to my shoulder, peering nervously back toward the dark archway of the study. I had maybe 30 seconds before whatever was down there realized the barrier was gone. My eyes swept the living room, searching for a better vantage point, or perhaps just a more defensible spot. The sheets covering the furniture seemed to shift subtly in the gloom, but that was just nerves, right? Then, the sound changed. The rhythmic thumping stopped, replaced by a different noise emanating from the cellar, a sound of enormous effort, like something massive was struggling to pull itself up a slick, vertical surface. A slow, guttural shh, shh, shh. I brought the rifle's sights to bear on the study doorway, my heart threatening to burst through my ribs. I had to see it first. I had to know what I was facing before I fired. The moment stretched, agonizingly slow. The dragging sound grew louder, closer, accompanied now by a low, ragged inhalation, a sound that suggested lungs that hadn't drawn air in decades, now greedily gulping the stale atmosphere. A shape finally appeared in the doorway. It wasn't the hulking beast I'd half expected from the local legends. It was tall, impossibly gaunt, and covered in pale, slick skin that seemed almost translucent in the weak flashlight beam. It moved with a jerky, unnatural gait, favoring one side, its limbs too long for its torso. But it was the head that stopped the breath in my lungs. It was vaguely human, but stretched. The features pulled into a permanent, silent scream, the mouth wide and entirely devoid of lips, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth. Its eyes, or where eyes should have been, were mere sunken, dark hollows, fixed on me with predatory focus. It was the thing from Dad's journals, the Watcher. It didn't hesitate. It launched itself out of the study, moving with a terrifying burst of speed that defied its awkward build, its elongated fingers reaching out toward me. I squeezed the trigger. The rifle roared, shattering the stillness of the old house. The heavy slug slammed into the creature's chest. It shuddered but kept coming, its momentum barely checked. I jammed the bolt back, chambering another round, my ears ringing from the blast. I needed to reload the magazine, but there was no time. The creature stumbled into the center of the room, its momentum finally broken by the massive wound blooming crimson and black on its chest. It reared back, emitting a high-pitched, wet shriek of pure rage. That shriek didn't just hurt my ears, it seemed to vibrate the very structure of the house. And then, from the upper floor, from the abandoned attic directly above my head, I heard a corresponding echoing noise, a sound of frantic movement, of nails scratching violently against wood, as if whatever else Dad had kept locked away up there had just been awakened by the sound of the gunshot. Before I could even aim at the attic floor, a section of the ceiling plaster directly above the abandoned, sheet-draped sofa cracked open, and something small, fast and covered in matted dark fur dropped directly onto the sheet, causing the outline of the furniture beneath to contort unnaturally. I had just fought my way out of the basement, only to find the attic was now opening for business. The rifle shot had been a mistake. It was a dinner bell. My focus fractured instantly between the wounded horror still twitching at my feet and the new, unseen threat dropping from the ceiling above. The creature in the center of the room, the one I had shot, writhed on the floor, spewing dark fluid that smoked slightly where it touched the dusty wood. It was dying slowly, but its thrashing was unpredictable and dangerous. Meanwhile, the creature that fell from the ceiling landed silently on the dust sheet covering the sofa. I couldn't see it clearly, but the sheet was no longer draped. It was moving, pulled taut from within by something sharp and powerful, dragging itself toward the edge of the sofa like a grotesque puppet show. I scrambled backward, pulling the bolt one last time, chambering the second round, and swung the barrel toward the attic intruder. "Stay down," I yelled uselessly, a tremor running through my voice. I fired the second round, aiming high into the distorted shape under the sheet. The report was deafening in the enclosed space. The sheet ripped open, revealing not a single creature, but a writhing mass of smaller, spindly limbs and glistening, segmented bodies, a nest of things, all tumbling out onto the floor in a shower of plaster dust and decay. They were insectile, fast, and they immediately dispersed, scuttling toward every shadow in the room. The first creature, the tall, gaunt one, let out a final choking rasp and went still. Its lifeless eyes seemed still fixed on me. I was pinned between the corpse of the brute I'd dispatched and the swarm of smaller horrors now closing in. I couldn't reload the rifle, and I didn't have time to grab the crowbar. Survival instinct screamed at me to retreat. Back toward the front door I'd splintered open. I turned and sprinted for the entrance. As I passed the coat rack near the front door, one of the insectile things managed to leap, latching onto my ankle with a surprisingly strong, chitinous grip. I kicked out violently, sending the small monster spinning into the wall, but the momentary stop gave the others the chance they needed to gain ground. I burst through the splintered front doorway and out onto the porch, gulping the cleaner, colder air. I slammed the broken remnants of the door shut, throwing my entire weight against it, praying the old broken lock would hold for mere seconds. I sprinted down the porch steps, my boots crunching on the dead leaves. I had to get to the van. I had to drive until I hit a town, until I had signal, until I could call Sarah and apologize for not listening. As I reached the edge of the lawn, about 30 yards from the van, I risked a look back. The front door was bulging inward. The brittle wood was cracking under intense, internal pressure. Then I saw it. Emerging slowly from the black entryway of the study, using the main hallway as a thoroughfare, was a third entity. This one was different. It was low to the ground, immensely broad, and moved with an unnerving, fluid silence that belied its size. It seemed to absorb the faint light rather than reflect it. It didn't have the stretched features of the first one, or the chaotic mess of the attic swarm. This one looked purposeful. It was the one Dad had written about as the gatekeeper. It paused just inside the front door, its silhouette filling the broken frame. It tilted its massive head slightly, as if listening to the forest itself. Then, its attention snapped directly to me. It didn't charge. It didn't rush. It simply began to move toward the porch at a slow, steady pace that was somehow more terrifying than a full sprint. I dropped the rifle case. It was useless weight now, and ran for the van. I reached the driver's side, yanked the handle, and dove in, slamming the door shut just as the gatekeeper reached the edge of the yard. I fumbled for the keys in my pocket, my hands slick with sweat. I jammed the key into the ignition, turning it desperately. The engine coughed, sputtered, and died. No, 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 no. I tried again. Cough. Sputter. Nothing. The battery must have drained overnight, or perhaps the sheer age of the vehicle finally caught up with it. I looked through the grimy windshield. The gatekeeper was 10 yards away. It raised one massive clawed hand, not in aggression, but in a gesture that seemed almost proprietary, as if it were retrieving something that belonged to it. And then I saw what it was holding clutched in that hand, dangling casually, clearly visible in the gray morning light. It was Dad's antique hunting rifle, the one I had just set down on the lawn. It wasn't just holding it was holding it with the delicacy of someone admiring a prized trophy. I hammered the ignition again. The engine caught, roaring to life with a desperate rattling cough. I slammed the transmission into reverse, spinning the wheel hard, tires spitting gravel. The gatekeeper took one long stride, its enormous form closing the distance rapidly. I looked in my side mirror as I fishtailed backward, expecting to see it slam into the rear bumper. Instead, the mirror reflected only the clearing and the gatekeeper standing motionless at the edge of the yard, watching me leave. Relief washed over me, so potent it almost made me vomit. I stomped the accelerator, fishtailing onto the gravel road, speeding away from the cursed land, pushing the old van to its absolute limit. I drove for nearly 5 minutes, the trees blurring past, the main road finally in sight. I risked a glance in the rearview mirror one last time, just to be sure. The road behind me was empty. The trees were dense. I sighed, leaning back against the seat, letting the adrenaline drain away, leaving behind only exhaustion and profound horror. That's when I noticed the smell, not the metallic scent of the woods, but the sickly, sweet, oily stench that had permeated the study. I looked down at my hands gripping the steering wheel. They were still smeared with that dark, viscous fluid from the first creature, and sitting neatly on the passenger seat, placed with unnerving precision on top of the oil-stained burlap sack I'd used to cover the passenger floor, was Dad's antique, leather-bound rifle case. It hadn't been on the lawn when I fled. I had left it there. And beside the case, resting where a passenger's thigh would be, was the small wooden music box, its lid slightly ajar. I hadn't picked it up, I was certain. As I stared, transfixed by the impossibility of its presence, the music box gave a single, faint click and began to play its distorted, slow melody again, signaling that whatever guarded the Blackwood property hadn't just let me leave. It had sent a very clear message, and a souvenir, along for the ride. The music box melody, tinny and agonizingly slow, filled the cab of the van. It was an intimate, invasive sound, mocking the miles I had put between myself and that rotting house. Every note felt like a physical touch, a reminder that the boundaries I thought existed between that property and the outside world were meaningless. I slammed on the brakes, the van skidding precariously on the main asphalt road. I lunged for the passenger seat, grabbing the rifle case and the music box as if they were ticking bombs. I threw them onto the floor of the back cargo area, slamming the heavy metal door shut, muffling the sound, though the tinny music still seemed to penetrate the steel. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely get a grip on the steering wheel. I needed to call Sarah. I needed to tell her everything, confirm her worst fears, and drive directly to her house, anywhere but here. I pulled out my phone. Still no signal. The network blackout remained absolute even out here on the main highway. I drove harder, faster, ignoring the speed limit, focused solely on reaching the next town, the next bar of service. For the next hour, the only company I had was the relentless, maddening music box, faintly vibrating through the floor of the van, and the sickening smell of that oily residue clinging to my clothes and skin. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the hulking silhouette of the gatekeeper keeping pace in the shadows of the deep forest, but there was nothing but empty highway shimmering in the heat haze. As I finally crested a hill, a small sign materialized. "Welcome to Harmony Creek, 5 miles." Harmony Creek. civilization. My phone immediately chirped, a triumphant burst of incoming texts. I pulled over to the shoulder, engine idling nervously. Sarah had sent 12 messages in rapid succession. "Leo, answer me! Are you alive?" "I saw the van confirmation. I know you went." The journal mentioned the toll. "Did you see the gatekeeper?" "Leo, please call. I found something Dad hid in my safety deposit box." I frantically tapped her most recent message, my thumb clumsy with adrenaline. "I found something Dad hid in my safety deposit box." I dialed her number. It rang once, twice, then Sarah picked up, her voice already tight with fear. "Leo, thank God! What happened? Did you go in?" "I did. Sarah, I saw things that shouldn't exist. I shot one of them. I think I killed it, but there were more. And one of them, the big one, it put Dad's rifle in its hand and just watched me leave." My voice cracked on the last word. "You saw the gatekeeper," she whispered, sounding resigned. "I knew it. Leo, you need to get out of there. Forget the house. Forget the evidence. Just get somewhere safe and don't stop driving." "I'm heading to Harmony Creek. I'm almost there. What did Dad hide in your box? What is the toll?" Sarah took a shaky breath. "It's a deed. A very old, specific deed. It proves that the Miller land, the house, the creek, the quarry, it doesn't actually belong to us, Leo. Not really. Dad spent years fighting this, and he lost just before he died. Belong to who, Sarah? Who owns the land? It belongs to the settlement, the families who lived there before the Millers bought it. They call themselves the Watchers, Leo. They don't believe in fences or titles. They believe in custodianship. I don't understand. If they own it, why didn't they just sue Dad? Because they don't operate in courts. They operate by rules. Dad's journals, the ones you have, he wrote about the toll. It's what he called the agreement he made to keep them out of the city, to keep them contained to the Blackwood land. What was the toll? I pressed, gripping the phone so hard I felt the plastic creak. The toll, Sarah said, her voice dropping to a barely audible whisper, was a blood sacrifice every 10 years to keep the gatekeeper satisfied and prevent it from ever crossing the county line. My blood turned to ice. A sacrifice? When was the last one? Dad wrote that the last payment was due 10 years ago, the year Thomas disappeared. Thomas was the payment. The image of Thomas's discarded compass flashed in my mind. My stomach churned violently. And now that Dad is gone, Leo, the debt isn't settled. The journal says that if the toll isn't paid in full, the entity doesn't just stay on the land. It hunts down the next closest living relative to settle the balance. You and me. I pulled the van into the dusty parking lot of a dilapidated gas station just as the phone signal flickered and died again. Harmony Creek was clearly as isolated as Blackwood had been. Sarah, I have to go. I'm going to try to find a sheriff, a police station. No, Leo, listen. The deed mentioned the payment must be made on the land before the next sunset, or the curse binds both remaining heirs. You left the rifle and the music box there. They are anchors. You have to go back. Go back? Are you insane? I barely escaped that thing. They want the debt settled, Leo. If you don't return the anchors and offer yourself, or at least try to negotiate, they will come for both of us, and they won't stop at the county line this time. The irony was crushing. I had risked my life to escape, only to realize the escape was conditional. I looked into the back of the van. The rifle case and the music box sat there, inert but radiating menace. If I left them, I was condemning Sarah. If I went back, I was sentencing myself. I made my decision. I had to get the keys for the old Ford and start the engine again. I leaned over the seat to grab the ignition key, which I had tossed onto the dashboard when I stopped. The key wasn't on the dash. I scanned the floor, under the seat, everywhere. Panic flared again, hotter and more desperate than before. Then I looked into the rearview mirror again. The road behind me was clear, the hills rolling peacefully. But in the reflection of the glass, directly behind my own terrified face, sitting on the headrest of the driver's seat, was the small tarnished silver key to the padlock Dad had always used on the boathouse door. The key I had never touched, the one I'd sworn to Sarah I wouldn't look for. It wasn't there when I stopped. I knew it wasn't there. And the only person who knew where that key was supposed to be was the one entity I'd just managed to escape. The music box was silent, the engine was off, and the ignition key sat like a poisonous toad on the vinyl headrest directly behind my head. The gatekeeper hadn't just let me leave, it had escorted me, leaving a breadcrumb trail of impossible occurrences to break my resolve. It wasn't trying to kill me on the road, it was playing a psychological game, forcing me to return under its precise terms. I slowly reached over my shoulder, my fingers brushing the cold metal of the key. I didn't look at the mirror again. I didn't need to see the entity standing silently in the road, waiting for me to accept its invitation. The silence in the van was broken only by my ragged breathing. I had a choice: flee toward a town where I had no signal and no proof, leaving Sarah to face the consequences of the toll, or go back to the epicenter of the horror and try to negotiate with something that dealt in blood and ancient pacts. "Damn you, Dad," I whispered, snatching the key. I turned the key in the ignition. The Ford sputtered, caught, and roared back to life, accepting its servitude once more. I executed a screeching U-turn, ignoring the sudden sharp movement in the back cargo area where the rifle case and music box lay. The drive back to Blackwood Creek was a blur of feverish dread. This time, I didn't slow down until I hit the gravel driveway. I killed the engine immediately upon arrival. The house was unchanged, silent, waiting. I didn't bother with the front door. I grabbed the keys to the van, locking the rifle case and the music box inside the cargo hold. I stepped out, deliberately leaving the van door unlocked, making it clear I wasn't trying to run again. I took only the cell phone, useless though it was, and walked directly toward the rear of the property, toward the thick cluster of ancient willows that hid the quarry and, more importantly, the boathouse. The boathouse stood on rickety stilts over the dark, stagnant water of the creek, looking ready to collapse into the mire at any moment. The padlock Dad had secured on the door was thick, rusty, and undeniably ancient. This was the place Sarah had warned me about. I inserted the small, tarnished key I'd found on the headrest. It turned with a soft, oily click, far too easily for a lock that had been sealed for decades. I pushed the door open. The smell of damp rot and deep, cold water rushed out. The interior was small, barely wide enough for two people to stand side by side. There was no boat, only a thick circular opening cut into the wooden floor, bolted down with iron clamps. The only thing in the room was a small wooden bench, and resting on that bench, a single new coil of thick hemp rope. I understood then. The toll wasn't about who they killed, it was about how they collected. The gatekeeper wasn't interested in the ancient house. It was the warden of the creek itself. I stepped into the boathouse. The air was noticeably colder here, the sound of the forest completely muffled by the thick mud and water beneath the floorboards. "I'm here!" I shouted, my voice swallowed instantly by the damp enclosure. "I'm settling the debt. Take me, not Sarah." No answer, just the gentle lapping of black water beneath my feet. I knew what I had to do. Dad hadn't been trying to hide secrets in the house. He'd been desperately trying to keep the payment contained to the property line. By returning, I was honoring the terms. I took the hemp rope and knotted one end into a slip knot, testing the strength with a sharp tug. I secured the other end around one of the thick, load-bearing posts of the boathouse frame. I stood over the circular opening, the iron clamps looking like dark, hungry eyes. I knelt, placed both hands on the bolts, and began to turn them, praying they wouldn't seize up. They moved smoothly, protesting only with high-pitched squeaks. As the last bolt turned free, the iron cover lifted slightly, revealing a suffocating darkness below, and the smell of sulfur mingled with the cold water. Just as I braced myself to heave the cover off entirely, a shadow fell across the doorway of the boathouse. I froze, rope in hand. It wasn't the gatekeeper, it was Sarah. She stood there, having apparently abandoned her drive to Harmony Creek, her face pale and streaked with tears, holding a heavy old spade she must have grabbed from our gardening shed before leaving. "Leo, no, don't do it." I called the local authorities from the edge of the county. "They're sending a patrol car. They'll be here in 15 minutes, she pleaded, her voice cracking. 15 minutes is too late, Sarah. They want the debt settled before sunset, or it binds you, too, I hissed back, gesturing wildly toward the hole. I'm the only one left who knows the terms. I have to do this. You don't know the terms. Dad's last entry, I finally deciphered it on the way back. The toll isn't a life, Leo, it's an object. He wrote, "The toll is the anchor, willingly offered to the water, to bind the watchers to the threshold." My mind spun. An object? All this terror, the near-death experience in the house, the implied sacrifice. It was all for a misplaced item? What anchor, Sarah? What object? She looked past me, her eyes wide with sheer terror, not at me, but at something standing directly behind me in the boathouse. The one thing they need to leave Blackwood Creek, Leo, the thing that keeps them bound here. I turned slowly, my heart sinking as I saw the gatekeeper standing silently in the doorway, blocking Sarah's escape. It hadn't followed me. It had been here the whole time, waiting for me to try and complete the sacrifice it wanted me to make. The gatekeeper wasn't looking at me. Its massive, lidless gaze was fixed solely on the object I was holding, the small, tarnished key to the boathouse door, the one I had used to open this very chamber. It took a deliberate step into the boathouse, its movement slow, deliberate, and final. It raised the hand that held Dad's rifle, aiming the muzzle not at me, but at the ceiling beam just above my head. "The key," Sarah sobbed from behind me. "It's the key, Leo. It's the only thing that can unlock the boundary." The gatekeeper fired. The deafening blast echoed across the water. The bullet ripped through the old wood beam directly over my head, showering me with splinters. But the creature hadn't aimed to kill me. It had aimed to destroy the structure holding the trapdoor down. The force of the impact against the already weakened wood caused the entire floor of the boathouse to groan in protest, and the heavy iron cover of the pit slammed down, the shock driving the remaining bolts back into their sockets with terrifying force. I was trapped inside the small enclosure with the gatekeeper, the pit sealed beneath my feet, the only exit blocked by the entity that guarded the threshold, and I realized the terrible truth. The toll wasn't supposed to be paid. It was supposed to be prevented. And Dad hadn't been trying to sacrifice for the Watchers. He'd been trying to secure the one thing that kept them locked in the darkness. And by taking the key, I had just handed them the tool to finally escape Blackwood Creek forever.